Welcome to a detailed look of the number 86 splitter from Osborne. A traditional design made by Osborne, and the company has been going since 1826, and this splitter has been the flagship of the company. It has a 6-inch tungsten inlaid steel blade, and the frame is cast. It's an original design. It has lasted the test of time and is one of the most functional and simple splitters to use. This device offers a different level of convenience. If you have a bench that you can dedicate to your splitter, ideal, we can mount it directly to the bench. If, however, space is of a premium, we have the ability to take a simple piece of wood. We can then affix the splitter to the piece of wood, screwing it in place, and that stays on there permanently. But then we can use a couple of clamps to clamp it to the bench, keeping it solid for working, and then we can take the clamps off, remove it and pop it away if we don't need it, and we have the free space left for the bench. However, on this occasion I shall mount it to the bench. So, using a couple of sturdy screws, we'll screw it to the bench, locking it down in place. Having fixed the splitter to the bench, we can now look at the component parts in a little more detail. Sitting at the top is the 6-inch hollow ground inlaid tungsten steel blade that is razor sharp. That's held in place by 2 very large and robust blade screws. I have an 8mm hex key, and I believe 5/16 is the equivalent, and we will undo those, and we will take one off at a time, and when we take the second one off, we'll hang on to the blade because it's not sat in, it just sat on, so we don't want to drop this. We'll take this and we'll pop this out of the way. This then exposes the CNC machined wheel that allows the leather to run through the splitter and sets the depth of the cut. The nice thing about being able to take this off is when using a heavily waxed leather such as bridle leather, it can leave a film of wax which can then influence the cut. Being able to get to it properly and give it a good clean is important. Keep the wheel, the roller, clean. We can now see the rest of the mechanics of the device, and we can see this bowspring here which keeps the wheel in place, and you can see there, if you press that lever, it pushes the wheel away, giving you space to insert the leather, and then pushes it back in place. And now we have these 2 screws here which influence where the wheel is set. This splitter is centered not using the blade but using the roller and these 2 screws. So we'll pop the roller back in place, we'll put the blade back onto the body, and we'll touch tight those. Now, there's a round hole in this blade, there's no slot, which means the blade is not adjustable. It's the roller that's adjustable, and once they're touch tight, we'll lock those off nice and tight. Having fixed the blade back into place, we now need to centre the wheel to the blade as opposed to centering the blade to the wheel, and these 2 screws here will screw in and make contact with the body down here, and the more that we turn them, and we want to turn them both the same so the wheel is even, there's no inconsistency in angle, we turn it until we reach the apex of the wheel, and at that moment we achieve the best position of the blade against the wheel for cutting. We then have this paddle here to push forward to allow space between the wheel and the blade to insert our leather and cut, like so. Now this is a splitter, not a skiver. It can produce a skive, takes much practice. At the back here, and I will move the camera so we can see that, at the back of the split, or the front of the splitter as it is, at the base here, we have a screw, and in turning that screw brings this bar down, which ultimately then brings the wheel down, changing the distance between the wheel and the blade. Turning it in the opposite direction, it then begins to raise the wheel, giving us less of a gap and a finer split. We set that to where we want it, and then we're ready to go. We're ready to split. We can then push this lever forward, which moves the wheel out of the way, allowing us to gain access. Now, we can see here there's a very large area of blade exposed. So, it's advisable, when we push the wheel, we push it away, so if we slip off, the hand moves away, but we always insert the leather from the back, not from the front. And we slide it until we get to the position that we want. We can then release the wheel, allowing it to sit back in place. Now at the moment, the wheel is pressing against the leather, which is pressing against the blade. As soon as we begin to pull, it'll seat back a little, allowing that first cut to settle in, and there we go. This is a perfect tool for piped seams, rolled edges, gussets, generally splitting down leather in a very, very even and consistent way. And you can see how smooth and even that cut is. This is a better finish than many standard leathers. It is just so smooth and consistent. This has been split to 1mm thick, which is perfect for rolling, for piped seams, so we can insert a core in between two other pieces of leather and we have a lovely pipe seam, or we can then take it over the edge of a piece of leather, stitch it into place, giving us a lovely rolled edge. There's an awful lot that can be done with this device. It is very, very versatile. This number 86 6-inch splitter is an ideal device for your strap maker. That'll be your belt maker, your harness maker, bridle maker. You can split down your straps all day long, set it, leave it set, run it through. Every single strap will be the same thickness and you will have consistency through your item. This also helps when coming to gussets. Gussets are very important and they need to be as consistent as all the other items on the bag. A lot of times we can get a hide of leather and one end will be thicker than the other. It's an organic material. So we fold it in half and we'll look and we can see that the bottom bit, this piece, is actually slightly thinner than the top piece. So what we will do is we will set our depth to the thin section and we will just draw that forward ever so slightly and we can see we're beginning to bite there. So we're happy with that. So we'll hang on to our thin section, push the lever forward and put the bulk of the leather through, starting at the thin end, and at which point then we can draw that through the splitter. That has then given us a very even and consistent thickness throughout. What we can do now is place that back in and then do our wheel up to a desired thickness, so as we begin to pull our surface we have about 1 millimetre of leather here and we can continue to pull that on. Having done so, that will give us a very, very consistent thickness of our gusset throughout. So when we ask it to bend around a corner and then bend back on itself to form a pouch or a bag, we have an absolute guarantee that the bag isn't going to distort or warp, because we've managed to get a very consistent thickness throughout. And that is simply by taking the back off first. So we'll have a thicker end and a thinner end. We then have an even and consistent gusset for a bag. Working off the theory that this is the ideal strap maker's splitter, I found it really practical when I'm making lined belts. Bridle leather is a very tough and finished leather, and it's heavily waxed, heavily oiled at the time. Gluing a lining to the back is always problematic. First and foremost, if I have a 1mm lining, and this is a 4.5mm thick strap, that will give me a 5.5mm thick belt. That's quite heavy. So I have the opportunity to take a slither down. If I'm lining it with pigskin, which is about 0.5 mm to 0.7, then I don't need to take much off. But if I were to apply glue to this, it wouldn't adhere, it wouldn't key in. So what we can do in these cases, we can, that's far too close, so we're going to drop the wheel down. We can, in these cases, take a slither off the back of the strap. So I'm turning the lug at the bottom to get the strap to fit between. So there, and now I'm going to raise the wheel back up until it begins to bite, but I only want to bite a slither. And we can see that that is paper thin, yet we have exposed these fibres that will take the glue. Now I need to use the entire strap. So what I can do, because this is locked off, I can push this in towards the middle, allow the wheel to come back, and at which point then draw that section off. And I have all these exposed fibres, and I can thin it down to the thickness that I want if I want to. But the lovely thing about this now is we can return it, but the other end, so we can go beyond, and at which point then we will carry on, and you can see there's nothing to cut off because it's the desired thickness. But as soon as it begins to meet that area where we stopped, we can carry on, draw that through, and then we have a consistent and even split off the back. This will take the glue will then adhere the lining, and at which point there will be no delamination. And we have literally taken off a piece less than the thickness of a piece of paper, and that's exposed all of these fibres to assist with the glue. That's why this is an awesome little device for straps, belts, bridle and harness.